Oh, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our RFP Bidders Conference, hosted by Latino Coalition for Community Leadership. My name is Rich Marquez. I am the Justice Services Program Director here at the Latino Coalition, and I'm joined by Jake Schutz. Jake, why don't you go ahead and do a little intro there, and then we'll just kind of go around the room and introduce ourselves.
I'm Jake Schutz. I am Community Connections Coordinator for the northern region of Colorado. So I'm really happy to be here and happy to meet with all of you today. I think we've all talked just in brief, but yeah, it's great to see you all here today.
So let's talk about the wages program and the RFP that is available in Logan County and the surrounding area. And what we'll do is we'll take it from head to toe here in terms of the wages program, what the RFP process is like, what the funding looks like for this particular RFP as well. And I think it'd be wise if we just start with a little bit of background regarding the Latino Coalition and how we got in this ball game in the first place. So Rebecca, I know this is going to kind of sound familiar to you. Shelley, I did want to give you just a little bit of background of who we are and what we do and how we came into the reentry space overall, because our name, Latino Coalition for Community Leadership, is kind of unique in and of itself. And so a lot of individuals that interact with us are often thinking, wow, what a unique organization. How did they get into reentry in the first place? So with respect to the Latino Coalition, our mission is to find, form, fund, and feature nonprofit organizations, community-based, faith-based organizations that are meeting the needs of individuals and families in marginalized communities. So kind of a big, lofty mission. Ultimately, we exist to advance resource equity. We'll talk about that resource equity in a minute. Resource equity and community well-being. And so I think that's a brief kind of really snapshot of where our heart lies with respect to the work we do. I would say another perspective there or a takeaway for you in terms of our role is in the Latino Coalition, we essentially get money to give money. And when we say get money to give money, it's really done within what we call a community reinvestment initiative perspective, or CRI, right? So in the Latino Coalition, we believe that small community and faith-based organizations, those are the innovators, the practitioners, the first responders, the mission-driven organizations that are really doing vital work in their community. Many times, these organizations are still developing to some degree. That doesn't make them any less important or vital to community. In fact, we believe at the Latino Coalition that if we can walk side by side together, there can be an information and resource exchange, capacity development, and technical assistance exchange through which we can collectively leverage funds to help organizations grow and develop overall. So that's within the kind of get money to give money spirit. So a lot of what we do within that resource equity lens goes back to the life experience of our founder. His name is Richard Ramos. He was our previous executive director at the Latino Coalition. Our current executive director, Richard Morales, the two of them essentially kind of co-created, if you will, the Latino Coalition and what we're doing in the community reinvestment initiative space as well. And so our founder in his community, he's based in California. In his community, he saw, these mission critical organizations that were doing great work. They were staffed by individuals with lived experience, unique experiences to their lives that contribute to the overall impact that the organizations were having in their community. In some cases, these organizations are led by individuals from communities of color, right? But many times they do not have access to large scale funding opportunities, whether it's like state, federal, and philanthropic. Many times small organizations are overlooked, yet they are just as impactful as more developed organizations overall. They just need that infusion of funding, large scale funding, but they also need that capacity development and technical assistance component as well. So our founder set off believing in that and looking for opportunities in which the Latino Coalition could really bid for large pots of money and then return that back out into the community. So what a wonderful formula we have. And it just so happens that we have found our space, I think our recipe for success within the community reentry arena, in a setting where organizations are supporting the needs of justice impacted individuals overall. So we've been doing this work, wow, since the mid 2000s as well. And a lot of the programming that we do in the Latino Coalition, it started really, well, not a lot, but it really originated in Southern California. And then it expanded to Colorado when Colorado set up the wages program in 2015, the Work and Gain Education and Employment Skills Program. Talk about that. We've developed like programs in Oregon as well. And then we have other states reaching out to us, kind of wondering like, oh, how are you working in the community reinvestment space? How are you working as an intermediary organization with developing reentry programs? So it's been great. And what we call this work is pretty much founded on a better together approach. At the Latino Coalition, we see ourselves as co-pilots and organizers of community, to the degree that community and faith-based organizations that we are funding, they're their own autonomous organizations. If anything, we have resources, we have infrastructure that we can move to the organizations to grow them organizationally, help grow their leadership, help grow their fiscal capacity as well. So it's a win-win. With respect to Colorado, I would say that the bulk of the Latino Coalition's programmatic side of the house is based in Colorado because of the size of the wages program and because of the ask of the wages program as well. So in 2015, the Colorado General Assembly passed a bill, signed into law by the governor, which created wages overall as an employment and education-based reentry program that was going to be spearheaded and feature small community and faith-based organizations. And within that bill, the bill asked the Department of Corrections to utilize the services of an intermediary organization, here's us, to really move the CDOC funding from CDOC down into community and then start setting up the wages program overall, which is great because we had been doing this work, as I had mentioned, in Southern California. So we had a perspective, we had framework and infrastructure of what it would take to stand up a reentry program in Colorado, and then recruit, find, right, form, and help develop community-based organizations to meet the ask of the wages program overall. So we've been doing this since 2015. I think the beauty in terms of the program that we have set is that we have found an ally in the Department of Corrections. And I kind of say unlikely in the sense that I came into this space, I think with a perspective of how corrections works, that it's primarily like prison-based. There's no reentry. Now granted, I came from the Colorado Department of Public Health, so I've been in state government. I understand how government works, but really not on the CDOC side. But when I came into the position I have now, I was like, wow, there's such an awesome peer group within the Department of Corrections, inside and outside of prison, that are really doing some transformative work to support individuals that are coming into community. So the fact that the dollars are going from the General Assembly to the Department of Corrections to Latino Coalition, that works well because we have found our peer group, our fellow colleagues inside facility and within the Division of Adult Parole, where we have the same why. So we know why we're in this game. We know what we're doing. And we have the right people at the right time in place to do this work. Then it's up to the both of us to find the community partners. We ask CDOC to set the strategic direction of the wages program. So we'll ask the question, CDOC, where are you seeing the need for reentry services across the state? We'll seek their advisement. And then they will say, okay, Latino Coalition, you've got the funding from CDOC. Use that find component of your mission to go out into the communities that we have identified that we can stand up community reentry services. And boom, the wages program was born. And it started really with a small nucleus of community partners. I want to say like 5 to 8, which has grown to 22 community partners overall, right? And we are across the state now. So that partnership is working well. I want to say the latest data that we saw is that typically in a fiscal year, Wages community partners may touch the lives of anywhere from 18 to 24% of the rural parole population in Colorado, basically. So that's pretty cool, and it does fluctuate overall. But with that said, it really is a testament to what community, what the LCCL has been able to support as well, and what this better together spirit looks like in standing up quite a robust reentry ecosystem in our state. So robust that we have to go back to the General Assembly every 5 years to really ask them to keep refunding the wages program. So our program sunsets. It's not like we're funded in perpetuity. We have to demonstrate collaboration. We have to demonstrate impact. We have to demonstrate results, right, in moving the needle on recidivism. That is going quite well, so much that we have gone through the sunset process twice and come out refunded every time. And really, it truly is a testament to the work that community partners are doing. From time to time, we have openings for new community partners. And in this case, this is why we're here today, we establish a competitive RFP process to see who's out there in community and interested in creating a wages program of their own and joining the Latino Coalition Department of Corrections in this great work. So we're going to get into this RFP, what the funding looks like, but I do want to pause. Rebecca, I know this is kind of old news for you. Shelley, this might be new news. Do you have any questions just on the Latino Coalition and how we got into this work?
I do not at this time.
Okay, outstanding. So let's talk about the RFP. Again, can everybody see that PowerPoint? Just a thumbs up if you're seeing the PowerPoint on your screen. Great.
Yes.
So we had talked about, oh, great. So we talked about the Latino Coalition, who we are, how we kind of got into the reentry setting in the first place. I've talked a little bit about the wages program itself, the legislation. It's right there on that slide that established the wages program. The reapplication piece, that bullet. So the way it works is we receive a funding from Department of Corrections on an annual basis. We demonstrate the results. Now, typically, we just kind of reauthorize funding every fiscal year, but it could be at the discretion of the Department of Corrections to have every organization reapply to the program. I haven't seen that the case since I came on board in 2021, but it could be an ask. Nevertheless, because we've demonstrated our results with the General Assembly, and because community partners have been highly impactful on the work that they do overall in the wages program, we haven't had to do a formal reapplication process, but that could be the case. And for this RFP, with respect to future fiscal years, as you'll see, we'll have a significant pot of funding for a 9-month period. Will most likely be reauthorized for the next fiscal year, the next fiscal year after that. And so it's kind of like a smaller reapplication period, if you will, in future fiscal years. But typically, what that is driven by is also performance. So if an organization isn't necessarily performing, we'll talk about the performance metrics here in just a second. But after 2 years in the program, if an organization really isn't up to performance, we may have that conversation to say, hey, is this program a fit for your organization? What do you think? Can we get you up to full performance? If not, maybe this just isn't a good time, good fit for you. And that's okay. You know, at the end of the day, if it's just not working for you, those dollars go back in the community and we do another RFP process. So that could happen, I would say, on very rare occasion. And as I had mentioned, this program, I should say, is really a strong collaboration. If you think about what success looks like in terms of the transformative impacts of wages overall on individuals coming back in the community, it's a three-legged stool. It's Colorado Department of Corrections, the Division of Adult Parole, it's you, the community partners, and that's the Latino Coalition doing our capacity development. So it very much is a win-win. So this slide is the performance outcomes. These are the milestones, the benchmarks in which individuals participating, or individuals, I should say, organizations, community-based organizations funded to participate in the wages program. These are the expectations here. And again, it can take up to 2 years, and we understand this. We need kind of an on-ramp for an organization to get up to full performance. We're looking for 100% enrollment rate overall. And in the RFP, if you've had a chance to read it, you'll see that there's an enrollment guide. There's an enrollment form. We talk a little bit about enrollment. So here's what enrollment looks like and how it's calculated. We typically take a look at a cost per participant in a rural area, as well as in an urban area as well. So we know that in Colorado, 70% of our state is either rural frontier. You're in Logan County, so you know this quite well. With respect to the enrollment, right now we have a cost per participant in a rural area of $3,500 just per participant to support them in their reentry journey. We take that, we mesh it with the funding that is available for the RFP, and boom, it spits out an enrollment rate for a fiscal year. As you'll see, we have enough funding right now for 9 months just because we started the fiscal year. So for this particular RFP, the enrollment goal is going to be 65 participants through the end of the fiscal year. Talk about enrollment additionally here in just a minute. But remember, WAGES is also an education and employment-based program. And so we are also looking at other indicators of success. We're looking at a placement rate. Placement rate would be individuals, the organization is able to place in employment, whether that's short-term or long-term. Education, again, we are an education focus, so that placement rate could also be educational opportunities. It might be in a community college. It could be in a vocational training program as well. So that's what we're looking at in terms of placement. Our placement rate there is 60% of your enrolled individuals, and we look at that in aggregate cumulatively over the community partners' lifespan and participation in the program as well. So the placement rate is kind of evolving, and what we look for is a steady trend upward to that 60%, and we'd like to see that 60% after 2 years for a new organization. The retention rate, we place at 50%, and so that is individuals that retain their employment after 90 days. So the community partner is working with that participant, helping them get work ready, helping them get into employment. And then we assess at 90 days, hey, did that participant retain their employment? If so, excellent, that's a retention outcome, and you can count it. The retention rate is more so than employment. Retention rate can also be individuals that go ahead and complete a community college degree. Maybe there have been a few that have gone on to the university and post-secondary work as well. So we definitely take that in consideration and we count it. Credential attainment is important to us. So individuals that are returning home that earn a high school diploma, maybe they're going to get a GED, maybe they've gone into apprenticeship or gone into an industry recognized credentialing program. That is part of the performance for the WAGES as well. In terms of recidivism, this is the golden question. So a lot of people ask, well, if the program is driving towards a reduction in recidivism, what does that look like overall? Our ask is that community partners, after 2 years, are driving at a recidivism rate of under 20% for all of their participants in the program. Now, we look at, in the WAGES program, we look at recidivism uniquely. Our definition of recidivism is individuals that go in or return to prison while they are in the WAGES program. Why is that? Because if we look at recidivism while they are in the WAGES program, we have a sense of how impactful the program is overall in affecting recidivism by offering educational employment opportunities. And so that's really why we look at it in program, as opposed to after a participant has been placed in the program and they move on and maybe they return to prison. So that's just a unique aspect of how we look at recidivism. I'll stop there. Are there any questions? So just a few
None
notes.
at this time.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't have any questions
Oh.
at this time. I just wanted to tell you that.
Okay, thank you. So program model for individuals that are funded is, this is infrastructure that an organization, they don't necessarily need to have if they are funded to participate in the wages program. But it's a process that we want to develop pretty quickly for an individual or organization that is funded to participate in wages. And I would say probably within a month, we should have most of these components in place. One is that the organization will need to enroll eligible participants. We have an electronic platform that we provide all wages grantees. It's called Case Manager. And that platform is how organizations enroll eligible participants. So organizations that are funded, they have access to Case Manager, and we've got that enrollment component done. And so enrollment really is coming from CDOC. There's a referral form that CDOC, the Division of Adult Parole officers, reentry case managers have, in which they make referrals to community partners, and then the community partner enrolls them into the wages program. Another component of the program is a process in which organizations are assessing particular needs and strengths. If you've had a chance to read the RFP, you'll see there's some content in that document regarding the insight tool or the individual needs and strengths identification tool. So we ask that individuals that are enrolled in the program, that the community partner leverage the insight assessment to further plan for and develop some goals that the participant is going to work towards throughout their participation in the wages program. And that leads to that third piece in terms of setting goals and plans. So every participant that is enrolled in the wages program receives an ISP or an individualized service plan. And we know that that document is evolving, and we know that needs and strengths are in evolution over time. But the two complement each other. So think of the insight tool as a resource, as a care management planning tool through which the ISP is developed. In that ISP, we do ask that one goal be employment focused, employment driven. Again, employment being a milestone, a performance goal, but also being at the heart of the wages program. Importantly, we understand that individuals that may enroll into the wages program, they may not be work ready. Maybe they're working on stability. Maybe they need to work on their physical health, behavioral health. So long as they have that intention to pursue work or pursue education, that is really what we're looking for overall. So just kind of keep that in mind. We do deploy a strength-based care management program. So all new organizations that come into the program, their care management staff, and you'll see me using the word care management, we say care management versus case management in the wages program. So our care managers will go through a 2-day orientation. What they'll learn in that 2-day orientation is this notion of supportive alliance, basically, that participants coming into the program, yes, they have a parole plan, yes, they have requirements for parole, but ultimately, if we factor in the insight and we're doing some collaborative goal setting, that participants can drive and they can have agency over their pathway, over their reentry pathway, over what they want to do and where they see themselves. So I think it's a compliment in the sense that wages has an infrastructure and how it works and what the performance looks like, but we really want the participants to drive that And so you'll hear a lot within that orientation, that 2-day orientation, this concept of supportive alliance. There's actually a strategy that we have that care managers will learn that allow them to do that. It's called innovating for impact. I don't need to go into innovating for impact right now, but just know that it's part of the care management methods within the wages program. And it's very much a value add, and it's a resource for our community partners to tap as they support their enrolled participants. The activities and services that help the participant accomplish their goals and enhance strengths, we'll talk about that, because you might be thinking, boy, do we have to have a lot of these services in-house? Can we network within our community? The answer to that is kind of somewhere in between, and I'll elaborate on that in just a minute. We had talked about the performance measures. Obviously, at the end of the day, our hearts rest on how the enrolled participant is doing. Are their lives changing? Are they healing? Are they moving towards transformation and stability? That's really what our hearts are at. But we can't escape that this is a funded effort, that there are state resources involved, and that there are performance measures. So we also need to have that demonstration of success. So it is a mix of the quantitative. We talked about what the quantitative looks like in terms of performance measures, and qualitative. There are opportunities within the WAGES program to hear from participants, to understand where they started and how they're progressing towards their stability and transformation as well. And then, of course, data tracking, just to demonstrate our results, so that when we go back to the legislature, the General Assembly, when it's time for sunset, that we've got the data to really prove that what we're doing is impactful overall. So that's the program model in the WAGES program. Let's return to the services. We'll touch base there overall. And I kind of briefly commented on, like, hey, community partners probably wondering, do we have to have all these in-house? Can we refer out into the community? The answer is yes. So for brand new community partners that are coming into the program, they may have limited infrastructure to do employment placement, educational development. That's okay. In the RFP response, you will have an opportunity to talk about what your program has right now with respect to educational employment opportunities. You'll also be able to elaborate on the community networks and partnerships and collaborations you can tap to refer participants to education and employment opportunities overall. So don't feel that you have to have this all-star in-house employment educational infrastructure. Not at all. In fact, if you think about our form component of the LCCL mission, that's what we'll work on together. We're going to talk about fair chance hiring. We're going to talk about fair chance hiring employment networks. We'll talk about the linkages that you have, whether it's in-house or that you have in the community. And how do we really arrange those to drive pathways and define pathways for participants to access them in your community overall. But again, the RFP is going to be a good space to talk about what you have now, where you want to go, and then the collaborations that you intend to tap along the way. I will say that mentoring is a big piece for the WAGES program, and it's going to be, it's a component, it's a required component of the program overall. And mentoring looks different for organizations. What we look for and what we value in community partners that come to the WAGES program is that lived experience component. Now, lived experience can look different in many ways. You might have a lived experience of having worked in a criminal justice system before. You might have the lived experience of supporting individuals in recovery. Your organizations have been doing this. That's lived experience. An additional level of lived experience that we value is organizational leadership or staff being just as impacted themselves or having gone through or moving through recovery as well. That's important. And what we want is to leverage that lived experience in mentoring relationships. Some community partners have established mentoring programs, which is great. We definitely support that. But others leverage that mentoring in one-on-one care management as well. And so that's how mentoring is is utilized throughout the wages program. And so you can see, if you think about the supportive alliance, the strength-based care management and mentoring, that's a little different spin on how care management is leveraged within the wages program, at least within the reentry setting itself. I think it's important to note as well that participation in the wages program is completely voluntary. So there's no mandate from parole that a participant participate, enroll, and just get into the wages program. No, it's completely voluntary, which means there is really this window for how we leverage mentoring and really use it to support the participant as they engage wages overall. So the other services in-house that we will onboard with the community partner if they are funded is the insight assessment. That's further explained in the RFP. We have talked about partnership, so leveraging resources in community. The ISP, we onboard that for the community partner. Housing placement and retention, let's talk about that. We'll talk about the funding that's involved for this RFP in just a second. You do not have to have housing placement right now, or you don't have to have your own housing units, reentry housing right now. That's not required. You don't have to have established linkages right now, master leases or anything in your community to put participants into or place them into. That's great. And that might be a state that an organization evolves to with time. With respect to housing placement and retention, as you will see here in just a minute, the funding in the wages program also includes supportive services and incentives that an organization can then leverage to support individuals in all aspects of their wages participation, including housing placement. So if you have an individual that just needs support with rent, maybe it's deposit, first and last, or something like that, you can use your wages funding for that effort. Other organizations, as they develop their housing infrastructure, they will use the particular components of their funding to anchor and solidify and really embed a housing component within their unique wages program model. So housing looks different for every community partner. It's definitely not required, but you can definitely leverage your funds to support participants to meet their housing needs. So keep that in mind. We talked about supportive services and incentives. I would say additional supportive services and incentives that the funding provides can be clothing. It can be bus tickets. It can be if an individual is employed and they need help, buying tools, you can use your funding for that. So you can use your wages funding, and you think, yeah, we need to use our wages funding for staff. Awesome. We need to do that. But you can get creative on what those supportive services and incentives look like to really meet the needs, the range of needs of your participants overall. So that's just a little bit about services in the wages program. And so here's the crux of what we have to offer by way of this particular RFP. So we are looking to award one community partner in Logan County and the surrounding area. We say the surrounding area because we know that the service area is about 6 counties or so within Northeast Colorado. We know Sterling is a hub as well. And so one community partner. The grant award right now is for 9 months. And it's 9 months because we function on a fiscal year that starts July 1 and ends June 30th. We are looking to start in October, so that gives us 9 months for the community partner to get the funding, onboard the funding, work with the Latino Coalition to get their wages program up and running overall. So the funding right now is $218,500, again, to serve a minimum of 65 participants by the end of the fiscal year itself. Of this amount, 37,000 can also be used to support stable housing placements. So there is an additional line item in our wages budget, 2 of them actually. One is the Housing Supportive Services Fund, and then the other is the Housing Support payment program, which is awesome. Let me talk about the Housing Support Services Fund, because part of that 37,000, there's some dollars there that can go into supportive services for housing specific. Anything that a participant needs to achieve stable housing, you can use partial component of that 37,000 for that effort. The HSP program, the Housing Support Payment Program, is an offshoot, and it's described in the RFP itself. HSP is for organizations that already have re-entry housing available as part of their organization. So I won't go too much into HSP. It's more like a housing program itself that wages dollars are allocated to. So that 37,000, the way it works is a community partner that is awarded, we then negotiate, we take a look at what your housing infrastructure looks like currently. Do you have reentry housing? Well, if you don't, then HSP probably isn't right for you. So how do we use some of this other dollars to really support stable housing for your participants overall? So I just want to make note that that 218,500, a component of that funding is for housing specific resources as well. Again, funding in future years, we talked about this, it's dependent on performance overall. I'll again state that for a new community partner coming into the program, it can take 2 years to get up to performance overall. From time to time, I really haven't seen this come into play, that there could be a community partner for ethical reasons. Something happens, it's egregious, or they're just like very low after 2 years in performance. We have the ability to terminate the MOU. Again, very, very rare in our world. The proposal process. So if you've gone to the LCCL website, you will see the RFP button there. If you click on that, there's a web page there that has an RFP guidance document on it. It really speaks to the wages program. It's more in-depth review of what we're talking about today. So that guidance document is there for you. It also includes an RFP checklist so that you know what documents to provide. I'm just going to skip one slide ahead, make sure I got it. Yep. Talk about those documents in a minute. The submission process, we use an electronic platform called Giving Data. And in that platform is where you will respond to the RFP. Our deadline is September 15th by 5 o'clock. And late applications, unfortunately, will not be considered. With respect to the documents, here's what you'll want to make sure that you have located in the RFP, and that if you intend to submit an RFP, that you upload into Giving Data. So please review the RFP document itself. It's definitely not light reading. It's kind of very technical. If you have any questions on like what's in that RFP, am I navigating the RFP correctly? Jake or myself are available to assist you, but it's important that you do read that RFP guidance document fully. The great question, the great kind of aspect here, I like the way we do RFPs in the sense that we give you the answers to the test. In that RFP, there's a scoring breakdown of like how questions are scored in the RFP. And there is an application reference handout that breaks down basically the questions itself. So you have an opportunity to use that reference guide to sketch out your responses, and you know how it's going to be scored overall. There is a budget and budget narrative template in there. So that is where you can take that 218,500 and you can break it out in terms of how you want to use it for your wages program. You'll see on that narrative, there's a whole section on personnel and staff. So let's get your staff paid, your leadership paid. You'll allocate funding for staff. You'll allocate funding for program expenses, supportive services, and incentives as well. Budgets can be a little tricky, so please keep our contact information close as you design your budget. If you have questions there, please don't hesitate to reach out. There is an enrollment plan, also a document that you will upload into Giving Data that maps out how many participants a month you think you can meet for the 9-month period to hit that 65. So it's just a sketch, right? So for example, in that handout, you probably don't want to put in 2 months we can meet 65 participants. Probably not reasonable, especially if you're a new organization. Maybe you want to put like, we can do 3 participants the first month, 4 the next month, 3 the month after that. So you can kind of map out what you think is reasonable to how many participants up to that 65 you can meet in the 9-month period. Now, keep in mind, for an organization that is funded to participate in the wages program, that first month is training. So that's the first month of October is training. So you'll want to map out your enrollments really to begin in November, because that's when we'll kind of press the start, right? So we've October, we've done the infrastructure, we've onboarded case management, we've finalized your budget, you've got the funding, you're ready to go. Those enrollments will start in November. A quick aspect of the budget itself in terms of how we move dollars out to community partners, that there's an MOU process that's involved overall. You can request up to 1 month of funding for your program. So if you apply, if you're selected, we work on a cost reimbursement basis, right? So you incur the expense and then you reimburse the LCCL under your grant for that expense. But we know for organizations that are starting out, you need startup, right? So we can advance 1 month of funding to you overall. Importantly, you can upload additional supporting documentation into Giving Data as well. So you may have testimonials, you may want to upload any additional information about your organization. We don't ask for letters of support, but if you're inclined to get a letter of support, you can upload it in the supporting documentation piece in Giving Data. So here's the selection process. We do want to be fully transparent in terms of how we do the selection of a new community partner into the wages program. So we will assemble an RFP review committee that will consist of LCCL staff, and it will also consist of community members. That LCCL staff is program folks like me, and it may include a member of our fiscal team as well, just because they're going to be able to kind of look at budgets in a very unique way. And also, there are some questions in the RFP that talk about just your fiscal infrastructure, so we appreciate their insights at the table as well. And community member, it can be anyone in your community. In some cases, it could be a wages participant, previous wages participant that's gone on to achieve success as well. We just want a community member in your local community to help advise us as well. We do want to be objective and subjective as opposed to subjective across the way. We really want to get kind of that high level view. We don't expect an organization to come to the table to have everything in place. So we don't want community members kind of going like, oh, they don't have A, B, C, D fully developed. No, we kind of want, wow, what is their mission? How long have they been doing this work? What infrastructure can they utilize and leverage to tap? What does their growth trajectory look like? So there's a lot in that selection process that the review committee is going to be looking at. The review committee is going to score the RFP based on the scoring rubric that you see in the RFP. That review committee will convene. They'll take a look at all applicants, all RFP responses, and then they'll make a recommendation to the Division of Adult Parole. They'll say, hey, Division of Adult Parole, here's all the community-based organizations that applied for this RFP. This is the organization that the review committee would like to recommend for funding. And so typically CDOC is inclined to accept our recommendation in terms of funding. They may have concerns themselves. So what we do is we deliver them all of the individuals, organizations that applied for funding, so they can see everybody that applied. They'll see who the recommended organization for funding is, and then they'll kind of give us a thumbs up or like, hey, we just need to talk a little bit more as well. Again, typically they're inclined to accept our recommendation in terms of funding. So that's a little bit about the selection process. Key dates just to run through. We've gone through these. We know that September 15th proposals are due. We hope to notify the awarded organization or grantee the week of September 23rd. And then we're off and running. There's a memorandum of understanding that is provided and signed itself. So it's kind of a contract there. then October 1, Jake and myself, we are sprinting in terms of utilizing the next month of October, for training and startup. I talked about case manager, so we want to get everyone's connected to the case manager platforms. They can accept enrollments. We'll do the tutorials on case manager, how to track performance. I think importantly, what you want to note that everybody in the organization that is going to have contact with wages participants does go through a background check. And so I want to pause on that briefly and what that looks like. It's not intended to be exclusionary by any means. In fact, CDOC, the Division of Adult Parole, where the background checks go through, they understand and also value lived experience in terms of the organizations and care management staff and the leadership as well. In fact, I would say of our 22 community partners, almost everybody has somebody that is just as impacted or has the lived experience of recovery going through it. So the background check is not meant to be exclusive. It's just a requirement of the Division of Adult Parole that anyone working with wages participants goes through it. I've had to go through it. Jake has to go through it as well. If you are not justice impacted or on parole, the background check just sails through pretty much automatic approval. If someone is on parole, on supervision, or they have just recently been discharged from parole, CDOC may look at that. In very rare cases, they'll say, you know what, maybe this person just isn't quite stable yet to be working in the wages program, interacting with participants. I think that's just a wise conversation to have. That can happen. It doesn't happen very often, but I just want to make that known that there is a background check process, but we do highly value lived experience in terms of the complexion and who's working and supporting participants along the way. Again, subsequent funding that the fiscal year ends June 30th. Typically, we'll just refund you for the next fiscal year. You'll upload some documentation. We'll talk about what your funding looks like. As I talked about earlier, you might have to reapply like you're doing now to the wages program. We haven't had to do that in a while. So hopefully it's a pretty smooth refunding for the organization after the fiscal year. Let's see, anything I'm missing? I think that's it in terms of key dates. Of course, any questions, please reach out to Jake, and we'll get you going. That's all I have in terms of the PowerPoint. I'm going to stop sharing.